You're on.
Okay. Well, we'll bring the meeting to order. It's about 7 o'clock. Frank Seminaro is here, Andrew Basil, Monica Hamill, Gary Otto. I'm sorry, what was your name again? It's
Jason Brockman.
Jason Brockman from he's a senior management consultant from Public Financial Management Incorporated. Sorry? Oh, today's date is October 15th. Okay, so we're glad you were able to come. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We did get a brief glimpse at your model a couple of months ago, back in August, and we wanted to take a second look and have you present this to us so we can better understand what it is that your product is and how it can benefit us, and hopefully you can answer any questions that might come up in the interim. Okay?
Well, first off, thanks for having me out. And I can make this as long or as short as you want. Normally it's about 20 minutes. That's okay. I'll stick to that.
Well, you're pretty much the only thing we have on the agenda, so absolutely, go ahead.
Well, so again, my name is Jason Brockman with Public Financial Management. For those of you who've never heard of PFM, we serve as the financial advisor to school districts and counties and colleges all over the state and country. And the reason we got into doing 5-year long-range financial plans for school districts was back in 2006 when Act 1 was passed into law. We helped about 130 school districts in the state kind of analyze the impacts of Act 72 in 2004 and then Act 1 in 2006. Once Act 1 was signed into law in 2006, a lot of the districts that we worked with contacted us and said, we're used to unlimited taxing power. Now that we're limited to Act 1 back then, now it's obviously changed a little bit with some of the exceptions going away and not being available to school districts. A lot of the school districts that we worked with at that time contacted us and said, it'd be helpful for you to help us plan for Act 1 and live within the limitations of Act 1. So we developed this model in 2006. Today we work with about 40 school districts. With this model, we work with about 200 school districts as their financial advisor when it comes to debt issuance. And just to give you some background on how we use this model with the districts that use this and the steps that we take throughout the fiscal year to help school districts plan for PSERs and collective bargaining issues, healthcare, retirement, but post-employment benefit obligations and all the challenges that you as a district face. So just starting off big picture, this is an Excel-based model. We at Public Financial Management will take the last 3 years of the district's annual financial report. It's the PD report that you have to submit and are mandated to send the PD. We'll take those last 3 years of AFR data. We'll take your current year budget and put all of that into the model. And that really gives us 4 years of historical data. You can kind of see on the screen. Now this screen is slightly different than your handout. The handout is more or less just a leave behind. So we're not really going to go through any of those pages, but you can see on the screen that this is a real district that we work with. And you'll see that the first year we have listed here is 2010. That signifies the 2009-2010 fiscal year. So anytime it says 2010, that's fiscal year ending. 2011, 2012, that's the 3 actual financial results that we have. We're obviously in the 12-13 budget. And then we take that data and we reproject out for the next 5 years. Now, obviously, if you're looking at this and you're probably sitting there saying, well, how can you project out everything, every single line item within the district's budget for the next 5 years? Our response to that is that's why this is an Excel-based model, so that you as a district can say, okay, what if the index is 1.7%, or what if it's 1%? How does that impact the district not only next year, but 5 years down the road? So it's an interactive model where you can kind of make one change, and that change flows through all the printouts and all the reports that we have listed in here. So it's an Excel-based model. We put everything in. We take a look at what we know PSERS rates to be, what we know teachers' contracts to be, what we know your debt to be, basically anything that we can get our hands on. If you have energy contracts where we know energy costs for the next 5 years, healthcare contracts, you name it, anything that we can put into here, we get this as close to reality as we think is humanly possible. Now, I will say that obviously the most difficult thing to project is salaries. If you're not familiar with Daniel Boone, we don't work with Daniel Boone as a financial advisor, but obviously a lot of districts are going through layoffs, teachers' layoffs. So those types of things is all things that we can pick up into here. A lot of districts also use this for collective bargaining negotiations. I don't know where you stand with your collective bargaining contracts, but a lot of districts use this for fact-finding hearings if you get to that point, and to use this in front of an arbitrator if that's necessary. So once it's set up, we set it up at the beginning of a fiscal year for the clients that we've been working with. The model is kept at the district and is available to the appropriate personnel in the district that maintain the model. And really throughout the fiscal year, the relationship with PFM and the district is we respond to any requests that the district has. To the extent you need something in this model that is not already in there, or you need help with running different scenarios, that's part of our job throughout the fiscal year. So my plan was to go through each of these printouts just to give you an illustration on how easy it is to change and run different scenarios. So I'm just going to do a couple of quick scenarios. Obviously, if there's anything that you have questions about or want to see how it's worked into the model, feel free to stop me. So, the general layout of this, as I mentioned, this is an Excel-based model. You'll see that there's yellow tabs. To the left, there's about 10 yellow tabs, and then there's about 10 blue tabs. Oops. And the general layout of this is the yellow tabs are designated as inputs. So to the extent you said, okay, I want to run a scenario where we have 0% tax increase next year, or we want to go up to the index, you would go to the yellow tab, make that change, and it flows through the model. So you have to make that change in one spot as opposed to going to 10 different places to make that change. I'm just going to touch on each of these tabs. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Basically, if you decided to use this, the next step in this process is we would get your financials, put all of this into the model, and then come down and sit with Danielle and anyone else that would have access to this to actually go through how you would run different scenarios and maintain the model throughout the fiscal year. So the first tab, there's a user guide in here that basically just tells the user how to use the model, how to run different scenarios, how everything's linked up. There's a tab in here that's labeled funds table. Basically, once we got to look at your financials and said Daniel Boone had vocational programs and adult education programs versus Wilson that didn't have those programs, this is how we code things in different ways in the same format as PD has required each school district to code things. So you have your programs in here. Further down the page, we have all of your different objects, obviously your salaries and your benefits, your operating expenses, all of your different local, state, and federal numbers. So this allows us to code things so we can show the printouts in a bunch of different ways, which I'll show you in a minute. There's a page in here called the General Labor's Projections page. Basically, this page allows us to make different assumptions for what we want to project all of our revenues and expenses for the next 5 years. There's really two parts to this tab. There's a collective bargaining units section. This district has decided just to build in the teachers union. Obviously, we have a lot more space in here if you have support staff, Teamsters, whatever the case may be. There's also a Schedule B in here for all other objects within your budget. So we have all your health benefits, your retirement benefits, health benefits, workman's comp, unemployment, all of your operating expenses, and all of your revenues. And basically, this allows us to the right in this green section is to make projections for what we want to grow every revenue and expenditure line item within the budget. You can get as detailed as you want with this model, or you can kind of stay at the same format that PD requires. There's a lot of districts, for example, that take the 210s, which is your group insurance, and break it into the 211s, the 212s, the 213s, which is vision, dental, etc. So you can get as detailed as you want with this, or you can kind of keep it at this PDE mandated level, which is the way we set it up as a base case. Really, the tab in here that has the most relevance to someone using this is a tab called the database tab. Basically, this is the place where all of the historical data is input into the model. To the far right, this is where all of the future year projections are calculated and made. So for example, this line item right in the top row is regular education salaries. You can see that this district, as a base case, has decided to grow their salary base at 3%. Ultimately, the number that pops out in this green section on the database tab is the number that gets going through every report in the model. So for example, if historically regular education salaries for this district, historically they've been 2.98%, so that's not much of a change. But let's just say this district wanted to make that 2%, for example, instead of 3%. They can make that change, and every year for the next 5 years, that expenditure is going to change.
Now, let me ask you a quick question. These are all percentages based on prior year numbers. I mean, do you ever break down budget items as a percent of overall budget, or because you're going to have different assumptions for different line items?
Absolutely. There's a number of different ways you can handle that. So I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question, but I'm going to...
Advertising, for example. A lot of businesses will say,
yes,
you know, we're going to spend 20% of our revenues on marketing. That's not 20% more than the last year. It's 20% based on whatever your revenues are for a given year.
Right.
So how are you addressing different things like that within the budget?
Yeah, typically for a base case, what we do is we always grow off the previous year. So, for example, advertising, it's a good example because it's a very small expenditure in most budgets. So for this district, I think it's a $60 million budget. Their advertising expense was $18,500. What we grow a lot of those expenditures at is, you'll see a lot of 2.2s in the green section. And where that 2.2% comes from is we go to, for things outside of what we have good data on for the next 5 years. What we have good data on is salaries, PSERs, health benefits, debt, those types of things. For things outside of that, what we put in as a placeholder is we go to the Philadelphia Fed survey, what they project inflation to grow at. Mm-hmm. For school districts, obviously, you're not going to see a huge fluctuation in advertising costs from one year to the next. You're not going to go from $18,000 to $5 million in expenses. So as a placeholder, what we do is we'll put in what we are seeing that the economists are projecting inflation to grow at for the next 5 years. Now, certainly, if you said, well, there's something unique going on within advertising, and instead of 18,000 growing at 2%, it's going to be 200,000 for whatever reason. Another way we can handle that is, so that's Object Code 530. There's all these filter menus up here that allow us to filter this data in a couple different ways. So if we filter 530, we get all of, I guess that's communications. Which one's advertising do you know? 540? Yeah, advertising. Okay, so 540. So let's just say that for some reason the administrative services for this district, the advertising was 16,000, and next year we think it's going to be 100,000. We also have the ability to just key in the number for the 13-14, which is the first projected year. So you have a couple different options. You can either just grow it at its inflation percentage, you can grow it at its historical growth rate, which is what we have, or you can just pick whatever you want and just key in the number. Basically, a lot of the districts that we work with at the end of the fiscal year, obviously, we want this 13-14 column to tie out with the 13-14 budget that the board is going to adopt. And rather than have to go through and figure out what percentage you have to type in for every expenditure to drive the exact number that's in your budget, what we'll do is we'll just go down this column and just key in the actual budget, line by line, in the same format that PD requires. So there's a couple different ways. I hope I answered your question. But
I guess my question was, and obviously with an Excel-based model, you can do anything you want.
Yes.
To what degree do you guys take the time to differentiate the growth rates of certain expenditures or revenues, because they're not all going to be based on CPI, right?
Absolutely.
So some may be as a function of revenue or expenses, some may be just a flat rate. And so do you guys take the time to go through and break down the assumptions and put them differently? Because otherwise, with a growth-based model, which is what you have here, then your overall budget is by definition going to grow every single year,
right,
with no contraction whatsoever.
So what we've done is we've linked up everything to the best that we can link them up. For example, your revenue from the state for retirement contributions, that's a formula-based model.
Right.
Based off of your salaries, based off of PSERS, and then you take 50% of that. So all of those things that we have a good handle on how it's calculated, that's all linked up in here. For things that you're describing that are not something that we would have access to that knowledge, that's why the model's kept at the district, because quite frankly, you know your district a lot better than we do.
I guess where I was going with that was, to what degree would you come in and help adjust the model? Because they're not going to have time to do that, right? And to what degree do we have the flexibility to own the model and do what we like with it? I guess is the second part of that question. Or is it proprietary? Is it a proprietary package that we don't have access to manipulate? We need to bring you guys into that.
The model's kept on the district's computers, so you have complete access 24/7 to do whatever you want with the model. We are also available throughout the fiscal year to help in any way we can. For example, we have districts that call us and say that we want you to sit in a fact-finding hearing with us. We did that with Muhlenberg a couple years ago. And they want us to sit there and literally show different scenarios to an arbitrator. What if the teachers get 4% salary increases and the school board wants 2%? And it's our job to link those things up and help the district through whatever they need help with. So we're available all throughout the fiscal year to help with that.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to take you off the game plan.
No.
Keep going.
That's good. So a couple of these other input tabs. There's a place in here called the real estate planning page, and this is always a very helpful page for everyone. This district, you can see, if you look at the numbers at the top, I'm going to zoom in here. This district, you can see the last couple of years have had balanced budgets. And for the next 5 years, and I can tell you of the 40 districts that we work with, almost all of them have huge deficits for the next 5 years primarily because of PSERS. And what you can see, this district, based off of the assumptions we have built in, so this is a $100 million budget, they have a $4 million deficit in year 5 based off of the assumptions we have built into the model right now. And so what you can see is, if you're going through this process and you obviously are probably pretty close to a 1.7% index unless you got an adjustment. 2.3. So the point of this is if you're doing your budget and you say, okay, what if we can go up 2.3? You can plug that in. That $4 million deficit didn't really change that much. It's 3.7, or obviously 0 is always on the table, and you can kind of see the 5-year impact of that tax increase. And you can do this for every year for the next 5 years. Now, obviously, no one knows what the index is going to be for the next 5 years, but you will certainly qualify for the PSERS exception. You will get your Act 1 index. So it's probably going to be in the 1.7 to 2.7 neighborhood for the next couple of years. In addition, you'll get the PSERS exception and any other exceptions that you may qualify for. Ultimately, what that shows you down here on the left-hand side of the page is what the millage rate would look like, both historically and if you did see these tax increases, what the millage rate would look like for the next 5 years. On the right-hand side of this page, this is labeled in the orange graph, the value of the mill growth. And what this is driving at is this is projecting what the assessed value base is going to be in the district. For this district, you can see it's historically grown at 6%. It actually declined 1 year, and then it grew at 0.7%. And moving forward, they projected at 0.5%. Now again, you can make whatever assumption you want, and to the extent you change an assumption, all these numbers up top change with that assumption change. Ultimately, down below in this green graph, what we're calculating for you is what the collected value of the mill equals. What a lot of districts say is, well, what if our collection percentage is 92%? How is that factored into this? And the answer to that is we always calculate the value of the mill based off your collected value of the mill. So that inherently calculates your collected percentage within that calculation. So we're simply just taking your current real estate taxes plus your gaming revenue divided by your millage rate to come up with the value of the mill. There's a page in here for capital planning to the extent you have any capital projects for the next 5 years. The point of this is to give you a quick idea of what a capital project may look like. It's footnoted down here that we've assumed 5% interest rates on a 20-year level basis. Obviously, 5% is far higher than any interest rate we're seeing. But the point of this, again, is this district has... usually we have 4 different options. This district actually does have capital projects in their 5-year horizon. But anyway, so we've built in the option that they're considering $15 million project. And the point of that is, you can factor that in, and that instantly builds that into the model. There's a page in here, as I said earlier, that most districts have negative or have deficits for the next 5 years because of PSERS. This page is actually calculating PSERS, and you can get a handle on what this means for this district. So I'm going to zoom in. So what this is doing is, in this line item labeled personnel services salaries, this is actually calculating their salary base for the last 4 years. This is actual AFR data. And the PSERS rates in the blue are actual PSERS rates for the last couple years. And you can see that this district's actual contributions over the last 4 years have ranged from 1.6 million to 4.5 million. And getting back to the discussion earlier, that is obviously calculated based off of the salary base, based off the PSERS rate, and that's how we determine the PSERS contribution. We also, on the revenue side, have factored in the state share of this PSERS contribution. So for this district, the state share is 50%, as in most districts, and we are factoring in this revenue for the next 5 years. Now, what you'll see is, as we're growing the salary base for the next 5 years, in year 5, this salary base is about 41.8 million. PSERS, now I've seen a whole bunch of different numbers on PSERS, but this district is assuming 24.5% is the PSERS rate in year 5. You can see what their PSERS contribution is going to be. It's going from 4.5 to 10.2 million. And they're only getting reimbursed, again, 50%. So really the net impact for this district is they're going from a net cost of about 2.2 to a net cost of about 5.1 million over the next 5 years. And obviously that's a $3 million shortfall, which is a big reason why these numbers are so negative. So that is, I'm just going to take this out. That is a quick overview of the inputs. For special things like your tax increase, for debt, for PSERS, we have kind of their own input tabs. For all other inputs, we have this general laborers projections tab, which allows us to project out 5 years for every line item in the PD budget. And just to go through these blue tabs pretty quickly, these are the same printouts that are in the handout that I passed out. We basically start out at the biggest picture, kind of drill down into the most detail is the way that this is set up. So the first tab is labeled the charts tab. This is just to give the high-level overview. It's just simply comparing total revenues to total expenditures. And the fiscal gap, which a lot of boards they just look at this printout every finance committee meeting to look how close that fiscal gap is between the total revenues and the total expenditures. One of the other graphs that we have on this page is this fund balance graph. And what this fund balance graph is projecting or illustrating is the orange bars represent the annual surplus or deficit. So for example, in 2010, this district had about a $2.1 million surplus, which is illustrated by this orange bar. So as you get out to the negative years, you can see these orange bars turn negative. What the blue bars are illustrating is their cumulative ending fund balance. So for example, this district is projecting to end the current fiscal year with about 6.6 million in fund balance. As you see these negative numbers obviously that begins to chew into fund balance, and this district actually turns negative in year 3, or 2016, in our 5-year projection. The next tab, again, this is a high-level printout. This is showing just some of the revenues and some of the expenditures in a little detail, not really get into a lot of the detail yet. But one of the interesting things that we always see with most districts is when you look at the distribution of your revenues versus the distribution of your expenditures, more times than not, your real estate taxes are usually within 5% of your salary and benefits. And when you think about collective bargaining and some of the percentages that you are seeing, not only with PSERS but your salary increases, and you think about the limitations that are placed on your real estate taxes, one side of the pie chart is only growing at 1.7% at a maximum. The other side, just because of PSERS at a minimum, is growing far greater than 1.7%. So it really doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what that math equates to over a 5-year period. Now there are some districts that we work with, especially the inner city districts, that distribution does not hold true. But for most districts in the suburbs, we commonly see the real estate taxes within 5% of salary and benefits. The next page is where we start to get into a lot of the detail that PD requires you to illustrate the data. This is where we're showing you all of your local revenues, your state revenues, and federal revenues in the same format that is in your PBAFR. Down at the bottom, we have all of your expenditures. Now, the way that this tab is set up is it's showing your expenditures by object. So, for example, this is showing all of the salaries among all of your different programs in a single line item. In 2 pages, we break all of your expenditures down by program. So, for example, we have your regular education, all of your salaries, benefits, operating expenses for that program. As you scroll down, we have your special program, special ed program, vocational education program, and so on. So basically, this printout is in the same exact format that you would need this data for to complete your PD budget. There's also a page here that I skipped. It's called the general fund percentage page. This is basically where all of the assumptions are illustrated. So if someone ever said, well, what did you assume for earned income tax revenue? That's the point of this page, is to show historically what has happened and then what we're assuming moving forward for the next 5 years as part of our printouts.
Those are percentages of what? The overall budget?
Percentage growth of year over year.
Okay, so growth year over year.
Yeah. So for example, this district, I know these numbers are hard to see on the screen. This district's current real estate revenue grew at 5.5%, 2.3, 2.4. Moving forward, we're projecting at 3.7, 2.1, etc. The last 2 pages, we have a page here for preliminary budget. Basically, the point of this is if you wanted to print out a single year for the next 5 years, you can do that. Obviously, 2014 is going to be the budget you're going to start to focus on if you haven't already. And then the last page is the budget variance page. One of the things that I didn't touch on is in the database page, since we're in the 12-13 fiscal year, we have the ability to say, okay, if we budgeted regular education salaries at $19.9 million, and for some reason halfway through the year we think that expenditure is going to be more like $19 million, you can update that expenditure or revenue, whatever the case may be. What that's going to do is going to update all the printouts to reflect the adjusted current year figure, and it's also going to begin projecting in year 1 of our 5-year projection based off of the actual data instead of the budgeted data. And then basically at the end of the year, it's going to show you the budget variance between budget and actual. So I know that was a real quick overview, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Again, the steps that we go through in setting this up is we get the model basically to this point, and then we would come to the district and sit down with Danielle and whomever may want access to it to show them how to change these different assumptions and run different scenarios. And then really from that point forward, model's kept at the district and available to you anytime you need it.
What's the cost?
It was like $6,000 a year.
6,000
for a 3-year.
Right.
For 3 years.
6,000 per year.
Right, but a 3-year
Yes.
like buying.
3-year agreement, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Good.
$6,000 a year for 3 years.
Yes.
What happens at the end of year 3?
You can keep going, or you can say, we didn't get as much value out of it as we were hoping for.
And then the model goes back to you guys?
Well, it's an Excel-based model, so you save it on your computers, and all we will do is have the district sign an agreement that basically says if we decide not to use this, we're not going to use this moving forward. I mean, basically, once we send it to the district, you have full reign to save this as many times as you want. You can have 100 different models if you wanted to. There's no way of us getting that back.
Got it.
And then what additional cost would there be if we called you in during the course of the year to help us?
That's all part of it. The only exception to that is, for example, if you said, well, we want you here for a fact-finding hearing, you had to come here and sit all day in front of an arbitrator, that's an exception to that. But things like if you said, well, we have a $20 million building project, can you build that example in here? That's all part of it.
Is there any page you have that would allow us to list out our debt service and maybe build out an amortization schedule?
Yeah. So
based on our $90 million worth of debt?
This page is, for this district, what their debt is for the next 5 years. Now, obviously, since we're only projecting out 5 years, that's all we're showing. To the extent you wanted to show more information for all of your debt, we certainly can do that. But basically, the way it's broken down in your budget, it's principal, it's interest, and then the state share of your debt for the net cost. This district, they're about $7.6 million, and they slowly drop down to about $7.2 million. So we will factor in your existing debt. And again, every district's different. We have districts that have printouts in here that no other districts have. It's just because something unique's going on in their district that they want to see. So to the extent there's something that we don't have in here, it's an Excel-based model, so we can
Just add another tab.
So we would have a separate page that would list out all of our
We would probably modify this
detailed
page
debts. Okay.
to list all of that. Yeah.
To what degree do you guys take, do you help assist the school district with forecasting in terms of like enrollment? And, so we're getting back to the assumptions then, because certain costs are going to be based on population, right? In terms of students, and special education may be a percentage of the overall enrollment figure. So, and that may drive our special education costs, which will also drive the number of aides that we need, or the number of teachers, or the number of counselors, and so on and so forth.
For that level of technical analysis, we really would look to the district for that data.
Right.
Once we got that data, we certainly could talk to you how that's linked up. For example, if you saw enrollment growing at 10% and you thought that would be a 20% increase in special ed costs, as an example, those are the types of relationships that we just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And once we knew those relationships, we certainly can help you model that.
I guess what I'm wondering is, to the degree you mentioned you work with 200 different school districts, and
well, that's
something like 46.
About 40 in the model.
Yeah.
200 is not related to this. We work with 200 school districts when it comes to debt.
Debt, I see.
Yes.
Okay. So in terms, all the same, you're working with 46 different school districts. Is that just in Pennsylvania, or is that across state lines? Okay. So to some degree, you have some market knowledge, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I was trying to talk about when I talked on this page, when we talk about the distribution of real estate taxes versus salary and benefits. I mean, there's certainly things that may pop out that, in looking at the other districts that we work with and say, this doesn't look right. And certainly we will communicate that, but back to your example with how enrollment projections may influence your special ed costs, we wouldn't have that kind of expertise on our own.
Right. Okay.
What version of Excel is the model written in?
Any version. It's I'm not an Excel
What
guy.
version do we have in the school district, do we know?
I think this is Windows XP, but we can still
Windows
use
7.
any version.
Thank you. I don't know.
No, I think we're on XP.
Yeah.
I think it's XP.
XP is the newest version. I think the next
Well, XP is the operating system.
version-
So Excel is 2005, 2007. So you'll guarantee that this will work with our
yeah,
version of Excel?
yeah.
Do you guys input any of the data, like use Crystal Ball or Solver or any of those other functions to manipulate the assumptions?
We can. We typically don't.
You typically don't.
I mean, well, I should take that back. We use Solver for things like if you said, well, what tax increase would it take to completely balance the budget? You know, in that scenario, we would either use like a goal seeker or Solver, something like that.
Okay.
This with Danielle and Mark, is this something that you guys could see as a model you want to use in the office? Is it something?
My concern is I don't think it gets to the level that I think you're looking for. Because our teacher's contract is not just a straight 2%, 3%, 4%. Everyone is different. And I mean, I know you could use an average, but from what I've gathered, all the information that I've been asked for, you want it more detailed by person, and I'm not sure that this allows you to do it that way for those specific costs.
Have you guys done something like that? I mean, that was one of my other questions, where
Yeah.
you set up the model, because I've done this with our projects, where you're pulling in outside data
Yep.
once a day or once a month, whatever it is, and it loads it up and then pushes it all forward,
Sure.
whether it's stock prices or it's teacher salaries or it's whatever it is. It changes on a daily basis.
So before, when I was in the database tab, I said you can get this as detailed as you want,
Right.
or you can keep this in PD format. Certainly within the salary object code, there's probably 10 different salary classifications: full-time teachers, part-time teachers, etc. Certainly, we have a lot of districts that have outside spreadsheets that take their salary roster and project out for the next 5 years, and that is certainly something that can be linked up. It's just we would need that data by program for each of the historical years, so that we can get our starting point, and then we can tie that spreadsheet into moving forward.
To what degree do you guys, put another tab in here in terms of your assumption page, and actually flesh out, let's say, a teacher's contract that models steps and yearly increases and tuition reimbursement and all those other things that build up the costs, stipends, and so on and so
Right.
forth, so that feeds our line items here in the
We would be
budget.
looking for the district for that.
Well, you're obviously looking for the information, but as part of the annual fee, you guys will build that out for us?
The steps?
Build out, the contract in terms of an Excel model, to flesh that out and then put that
No, typically
embed that in here.
Typically, we don't do that. I mean, that's just. We would look for the district to put together that spreadsheet,
Okay.
and then we could link that in.
Gotcha. All right. And one other question I had for you. One of the things we've sort of run up against when we're looking at historical data over the last 5 or 6 years for all these different line items, and then we're trying to project forward over the next 5 years, one of the things that keeps coming up is the codes change. So you've got that in here as, I guess, the fund table, right? So you go back to the fund table, and apparently these codes on the left-hand side, 1100, 1200, 1600, change from year to year from the state. I mean, that was one of the
Not
things.
at that level. It's the
No.
other numbers
No,
that
it's,
change.
It's
it's
well-
not necessarily that the objects change, it's how people used to code here. Like if they coded something to a 610, which is a supply, and it really should have been, let's say, printing, which is 550. It's not necessarily that the state changes it. It's, since I came in, I'm trying to get things
I see.
per the state, and
Right.
it's just taking time. I mean, you can only do so much. So to his point, if you're going to go out with the 610s, that might not really be accurate, because
Right.
I'm trying to get things every year. I'm finding more and more, and I'm trying to get more and more things correct. So
Well, so long as printing and and paper products and all that kind of stuff is all under one larger number,
But
it's
not.
fine. But if it's going into salaries and it should be something completely entirely different, then obviously we're never going to be able to
Right.
compare apples to apples. Well, that's not a modeling issue. That's just an input issue. Okay. I don't have any other questions for the time being. Do you guys have any questions?
Mark, when you manipulated, when you went out in the out years and you decided that, we have an anomaly for 1 year and you hard-coded that in, how easy is it to paste that movement back in there? Is it just a drag down?
Yes, I forget which one I keyed in, but let's just say
It was 19 million, I think, was the one over here.
yeah. So that was for the adjusted for a year. We would just delete that. But for example, if we went to 13, 14, and let's just say we budgeted this one to be 20 million. Oops, not 2 million. So we budgeted that to be 20 million. Now I minimized this ribbon, and this is all the things that we would talk about when we came to sit with the district. What we typically do is, if you hard key the number in this section, we would recommend putting this number in blue so it's an input, so you know it's an input. Now, if you want to change it back to a formula, it's as simple as just dragging that up and it goes back to the formula.
And then when we would, let's say the district wanted to manipulate this and put some of our own spreadsheets, maybe we want to see a different chart.
Right.
That's possible to do in here. Like we could put a tab in here and it's.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Do you guys do any modeling, or in terms of predictive modeling for not only the current fiscal year but future years as a percentage of once we've set our budget? So you're looking at fiscal 15, and we're looking at our budget. We project we're going to spend $20 million. Now, as we're going through that year, fiscal year 15, and we're trying to figure out whether we're over or under budget, or are we on target for budget? Do you guys in your model here represent what our budget looks like on an annual basis, and then we can benchmark off of that to see how we're doing?
Yeah, so when I said at the end that every district has certain tabs in here that are slightly different, this budget variance is one of them. We have one district that has 3 different years in here, so we have a budget variance for, I think they have 11, 12, 10, 11, and 12, 13, where basically their board requires them, I'm not suggesting this here, their board requires them to compare their actual to their budget. And so what we have on the database page is a column for their budget, their actual, and then we have a report that obviously shows that variance for each of those 3 years. I mean, it's certainly something that we can add in. That's easy data to get our hands on.
Okay.
Does a report like this have the capability of inherently showing where you projected versus where you fell? In other words, how accurate was our projection?
Yeah.
Because when I look at these models,
Year
I
over
always
year
know how
or
much.
current year?
Pardon?
Current year
No,
year
just
over year?
year to year as you go through this process, it would be important to me to know how accurate the model is. Was there like if we say at the end of the day we projected, in salaries, X, and we come in at X minus or X plus, I want to know how close were we really?
That's your variance report.
Is that what that does?
Yeah.
So that's already built into
I mean,
it.
I think I know what you're saying. I think in my experience with the districts that use this, it's not, and this is always a tricky thing. This isn't, like for example, this district, we're not saying we obviously have a lot of assumptions built in, and this model is only as good as the assumptions.
I know, I get that it's good as their assumptions, but the farther out you are is what concerns me as the closer you are to the present. So if I use this for 3 years and I go back after year 1 and I go, well, what predictive validity does this have if it was off by 30%?
Right. Well, it's only as good as the assumptions that go into it.
Okay.
And so, in our experience with this, it's not like on July 1st, okay, we hit print and then we just compare the next 12 months to that printout. This is a rolling model that...
I understand, but at the end of the day, you're going to have data that says this is where I thought I was going to be, this is where I was.
Right.
Yeah, I
We
think-
can make a definitive decision about how close that was.
Yeah, I think the issue with any model is it's just as good as its assumption. So,
Understood.
you know, at the end of the day, you're looking at the variances, and you're saying, okay, well, we assumed X and we got X plus 10. So our assumption was way off.
And-
Now that gives you the ability to go back and drill
Right.
into your assumption, say,
Right.
now what would have been a better, should we have tied it to CPI? Should we have done it as a percentage of overall sales or revenues or expenditures, or should we have used a different benchmark or a different
Right.
set of assumptions to drive that that particular cost line or expenditure or revenue line forward? And that's how you refine the model going forward, so it's a little bit more predictive.
Oh, I know it's a little bit of a, like a quicksand type environment, I get that. I would want to know, you know, if I'm projecting 13, say we use this 3 years, well, I project 13, and after 13 is now historical, and I go back and look at what, because I can go back and look at on paper and see what we projected. And when we see, but that gives us more confidence as to whether or not what our 18 or 17 in those projections 3 or 4 million years out are. It's not a big issue, I just was curious. I get it's a projection.
But as a rolling model, think of like a cone, right? So anything's going to, it's like this. So in year one, your confidence interval in terms of predictability
Right.
is going to be a lot better.
Right.
As you get out, your confidence interval
Understood.
is wide. But every year, you're moving the cone.
Correct.
Right? So if we're looking at 2016, and we're not going to be so accurate, but as we get closer to 2016, now we're in 2014.
Because you're changing
We're going to look at
assumptions.
2016 again. Now we're
Right.
2 years closer. It's easier to predict what 2016 is going to be. 2015 is even.
And you
even
could
more
have
realistic.
gotten new data. Maybe they changed the Peasers rate, or they changed, you know, the contract.
Let's hope they
contract
change the
assumptions.
pieces.
Well, down. That's what
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I don't have any other
Well,
questions.
I guess I would ask, Mark, you're new to that. I mean, you said you did some of this. How does this look based on what you've done at the county level?
Well, the county level is more rudimentary, so it doesn't have all the bells and whistles, like being able to, how the assumptions, you can just plug a number in and it just flows through. Ours was more, well, here are our out years, here's what we're going to assume, we just plugged it right into the forecast versus having the ability just to go to one tab and change it and flow through. But, I mean, we basically had a fund balance projection, a tax, you know, seeing where your tax rate would go, and then basically the forecast of the expenditures grouped together. Now we just started going to breaking it more apart, like as you showed. You can get it very detailed in this this program. Basically, you do by the line item, which is pretty good because if you have any type of variance, if you're just looking at revenue and saying, oh, it's 3% increase, you can't say that. But if you break out that revenue, because some revenue grows that doesn't grow at all. Some revenue, like interest income, grows very small, and some revenue, like your tax rate, is basically fixed, which depends on other factors like assessed value growth, or if you're going to increase your tax rate. So this model basically covers it all from that perspective. Now, whether or not it's as detailed with at the county level, we had a separate report that we had position control by employee. And we projected out just the current, what the next year's budget would be. But to model that in a 5-year forecast would not be a problem because you basically have all the factors in your contract that you know. Now going beyond that contract, you start making assumptions that you hope are correct or what you're trying to go for in your next collective bargaining unit. But I mean, like you said, that's something that we would have to do on our own, which I'm not. I don't look to see how many employees the district actually has, but could be possible.
Oh, I think we could definitely model out our contracts. I mean, you know, Danielle's actually just taken the employees and we've moved them forward through a 5-year process based on the current contract. What we've never done is back-ended it or front-ended it and actually developed the assumptions page for all that, for the contract essentially, and then put together graphs and models to show, okay, well look, if it wasn't 4, 4.5, 3 in terms of growth, it was 2, 3, 3, 2. What does that do to your ultimate cost going forward? Right. Or if stipends weren't this, they were that, or if you weren't doing $3,500 per employee for tuition reimbursement. It was $2,000. How does that impact that based on the percentage of teachers that go back and take classes on an annual basis? So,
Is the contract has like step increases?
oh yeah, we got
Is it
everything in there.
percentage based or just an added?
It's a dollar figure based on credit hours and tenure.
That's not,
It's a matrix.
that's not as bad as it
No,
being
it's-
5% increase on some of the contracts that kind of has like
Well, we do have a percent increase.
the step increase.
So the
on
steps
top of-
increase at a percentage rate every year, but then the steps themselves move based on your education level and your tenure.
Yeah. Okay, and that's basically looking at where the teacher stands with their credentials and going from there, projecting that out.
Right.
You said this is 6,000 a year. Is there the 3 years of minimum agreement?
No, you can do a single year, but for that it's 7,500. I would say 90% of districts use the 3-year contract.
Okay. Do you have any other questions for me? Dr. Otto?
I mean, it's just a question of, I guess I would put some pressure on you guys. Does this look like a tool that you would, because I love the data. I mean, I like it easy, so I can go, oh yeah, 2000, it's a nice planning tool. I love planning tools. So for you guys, maybe you need to think about it a little bit. I don't mean to put you on the spot now, but
Well, we're not making any decisions tonight.
No,
so.
right, but I mean, it looks like it's worth
The
considering.
important thing is one of us is going to have to maintain it. It's going to have
Yeah,
to
you're
be.
Well, I guess that would be my next question. That is a
I
question.
mean,
I'm glad you brought that
So
up.
there's got to be time, so we've got to figure out how that can factor into everything.
What's your turnaround time if we start handing you data to get this up? and
Once we
running?
get all the data, it's about 10 business days, 2 weeks.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have any questions for us?
No, if you think of any other questions, along the way.
We've got your email address.
Yeah, and obviously, if there's printouts in here that you're interested in that we don't have, it's an Excel-based model, so we can certainly do our best to get it in here. I mean, we haven't really come across anything that we weren't able to work in here somehow. I mean, it might not have been exactly to what the district was looking for, but we can do our best.
Well, I think you hit on the main points. We need to know, if we decide on obviously, where we're going to be headed with if we tax or don't tax, if we use fund balance or if we don't. I mean, all those projections I think are key for the community. And to me, that's the biggest one, to keep the board informed in a succinct and explainable way, and then to be able to take this data and spin it into presentations that make sense to the public,
Yeah.
because they're ultimately the ones that have to see this.
In my experience, in doing this in front of the public a couple times, we commonly,
Oh, these charts will drive most people crazy, I get that.
just this chart, if you're trying to show like 4 or 5 different scenarios, we have a page of assumptions and then this chart. Okay, this next scenario, instead of a 3% tax increase, it's a 0% tax increase, and this is what the ratio looks like. So, you can obviously get this very detailed, but for the public, it's nice to keep it at a bigger picture.
No, you need a lot of succinct if what, then charts.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and if we do this, then this will happen. If we don't do this, then this will happen. I think that's key for the public, because that's the big if-then questions that they're asking.
Right.
Chase, which one of the school districts has been using this the longest, and how long have they been using it?
We have a bunch of them using it since 06.
Can you provide us with some references to it? Oh,
Yeah.
They've been doing about 6 years on
Yeah.
this model.
Yeah, I guess it's been 6 years.
And here in Berks County?
Wilson?
I know Wilson. Yeah, I
Wilson
told
uses
you
it?
that Wilson
Okay.
uses it.
Right.
I mean, looking at it, I guess we could talk about it over the next couple of days, bring it to the board level for discussion, and take it back to the committee or to the full board. I definitely think that as times are going to get a lot tighter, good forecasting is going to help explain why things are the way they are. And if the biggest thing we get out of this is the ability to explain
going on in the public, then I think it's worth the money that we're going to spend. I don't know what the committee thinks about that comment, but that's kind of where I feel.
We'll have Jason pack up and then discuss it a little bit. Oh, it's the rest of it.
Okay.
Sir.
Take your time. Just for the record, we're going to recommend, the Finance Committee, I think, is going to recommend that we have a zero increase budget. If there's any objections to that, please voice them now, but otherwise, that's, I think, what the recommendation will be at the voting meeting. Okay. I think that went without saying last year and the year before, but we'll have it officially on record then.
You mean for the freeze?
Yeah, for the freeze.
So we're going to,
Freeze the budget.
Freeze the budget.
except for paying bills.
No, not a cent. I mean, incentives.
Right. What we've done the last
2 years, 3 years.
since I've been here.
Right.
All right, so noted. We'll note that for put a little email out to everybody tomorrow. Because I put an email out each year. I guess maybe we assumed that was going to happen. And I didn't get the official word, so we'll make it official. I don't really think that we've never really even done that with board vote. We've just kind of
Yes, we have. It's
we
been
have
at the minutes.
we've actually done it as a vote. Will we do the agenda for Monday night?
Yeah, put it on the agenda for Monday night.
Daniel, do you need any extras?
I'll take them just in case the rest of the board wants. That's great.
Probably,
Yeah, we'll scan them in and send them to the rest of the board. I think that's appropriate.
Is this what you had emailed me?
I think so, yeah.
Probably pretty close to that. Jason, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
See ya.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess we'll wait till Frank comes back in here. How do you pause this thing?
Just hit the stop button there.